Okie dokie, what the fuck? Chanel, please don't knock that over. So by the title, which should be correct, the title is going to be I'm a vegetarian again. How am I going to describe this? So recently I have been personally thinking a lot about my choice of being a vegetarian because I should always think about the things I chose to do. And one of the things I had come to the conclusion was that all things that live do not decide in the process of us collecting them for our benefit of eating, do not decide and tend to put up a relative fight in the process as not to die. However, due to the condition that plants find themselves in, it is not that much of a dramatic and obvious fight. So one of the aspects that animals have the benefit over plants is that they have a clear suffering that we understand and is quite obvious to us. And I had come to the conclusion that we shouldn't decide what is moral by suffering, by the fact that it suffers. I concluded that since both plants and animals do not wish to die, in the process of usually when we come to kill them, or take the food from them, or they do not wish to lose their fruits or energy and enter an unadmirable state, which is usually weakened or death. We should not we should not prioritize either one, i.e. plants don't suffer necessarily, but do not wish to die as much as both do not wish to die just as the animals do not wish to die. However, animals have the benefit for PR's sake that they scream, bleed, and have guts, and that's why we sympathize with them. So I came to the conclusion that if I'll eat plants, I should also eat animals. However, I think that is a fair enough argument when you decide saying that both things are unfair or unjust and necessary. And I think you should come to the conclusion necessarily that to live, other things must die for us to be around. We must kill the apple so that we can eat it and reinvigorate life into us. However, it is not a very ideal situation, or it is the least ideal situation for animals. And animals are the only ones, as far as I can understand and have seen and researched, have the second category of true suffering. Chanel, please do not pull that wire. No, please don't. They suffer. They bleed, squeal, and they feel pain. The plants probably have a conscious ability, as their version of what we have, of like bleeding and feeling pain, of attempting to put out certain toxins or letting out sap to heal wounds. But they, as far as we understand, do not have the true suffering that we do. So when it comes to manufacturing or producing our food, we should understand that everything we do is an unjust and unfair thing to give ourselves life. However, not unfair necessarily, but unjust. Or not unjust, but something has to die. We can't just desensitize it to, it wasn't really ever alive. It is, and it didn't plan to die itself. But with animals, they have this consciousness of a general environment. When animals are being chased inside a pen, lined up to be shot, like little pigs, cows, and all that kind of stuff, and when they shoot them, they understand this, and they have the conscious terror prior to death. Plants, as far as we seem to understand, they do not have enough of a consciousness to experience as much as this horrifying suffering is. And the manufacturing process of how we get animals is not it's not designed to minimize pain, it is to maximize production. With plants, you can't really maximize production out of We'll pick it early, and give them unhealthy fertilizer that's bad for the environment, all this kind of garbage. But animals don't get that privilege. Baby male chicks get ground up as babies to be used as chicken nuggets. They will kill diseased animals. They will. It's a much more methodically harsh environment, especially when the general like consciousness has a process of feeling of pain. So I've come back to the conclusion now that eating a cow and eating an aloe vera plant are both not kind in themselves. You're not doing the plant a favor. You're ultimately doing the plant a disfavor by just cutting off one of its sources of energy, one of its things it's spent time to grow. Of course, you can be a doctor and notice that the cow's leg needs to be cut off due to the infection. This will save it, minimize pain. We do so. We did the ultimately somewhat righteous thing to do. Same thing with a plant. Infected, we can help it. But we don't tend to wait for an animal to be sick or a plant to be sick for us to cut it and then eat it. And most of the time, we probably shouldn't eat an animal. I think animals have a double layer of consciousness, and that's why it's somewhat more unjust to kill them. Now the issue is, and I tend to always use this as an argument, is due to the fact that humans are not superior to animals in any way, shape, or form. We are animals ourselves. We're not some. It isn't animals. Humans. Humans are a group, or one of the few apes that exist in our world. We're not something special. But then people point at intellects and our ability to think, design, feel certain emotions, or like artistry and all this garbage. And I tend just to see it as an ability to end our thinking. I think what I've come to the conclusion is my previous position of all things suffer, for one thing to live, something else must die. I think that is true, and I don't think whatever it is, plant or animal, or living, walking animal, it is us doing them a favor. I think we're always in the process of the victimizer, and these things are always going to be the victims. However, one has a far worse experience in the way we do it in factories. Now, what if we had this case of a chicken laying on the floor asleep, just laying there, and we had this perfectly sharp knife that as soon as we dropped on it, cuts everything perfectly, and the brain loses consciousness, because I know apparently they can stay awake for like a week, and the body no longer lives, and all suffering ceases to exist. And then a plant is either one worse or better. I think in that case, both are quite justifiable. I think if you give an animal a fair enough life, and you decide to kill it at its end of its life, I need to perhaps think about that more, but I do think to some extent it is a far better case, and ultimately the biggest issue is not whether I should just eat animals, or should just eat cows, or just eat plants, or eat both. I think it is, should I be eating the meat that is coming out of the industry, and I somewhat, perhaps unconsciously, decided to ignore that fact and start eating meat again for the last month or 3 weeks. And I regret that decision. I regret it, but it's a part of my learning process, and I'm going to go back to being a vegetarian. Capiche? We're young here.